When I walked into the theater for Sinners, I wasn't really a film fan. Sure, I always checked out the newest Marvel movies in theaters, and if my parents wanted to watch something at home, I always knew what had recently come out. But in all honesty, I really didn't care about what goes into making a movie, just the end result. And I know it's insanely cliche to say a movie changed you, but in my case, I really do feel that way about Sinners. I just remember as soon as I walked out of that theater, I rushed to social media to find any clips I could and rewatch them over and over again. I'm not exaggerating when I say that for the next year, I obsessed over the film's technical complexities, its layered symbolism, and the ways that it's simultaneously able to create a story about the assimilation of Black culture and killing vampires. And with the film now being the most nominated in Oscar history and having won 4 of those awards, I want to take you guys on a 1-year retrospective of Sinners to decide if it still holds up and if it was really worth all the hype it got. Short answer is obviously yes, but don't you want to know why? I want to get my one negative out of the way first, just so I can get to glazing as fast as possible. I really feel like the only issue this movie faced was its own marketing, and that's for one main reason. It focused on the vampires way the hell too much, and not enough on the music. That first trailer is almost entirely smoke, stack, and the vampires. It doesn't even include the film's true main character, Sammie, which makes zero sense given how much of the film he's in. And while the second trailer has glimpses of Sammie and the music that drives the film, after the 1-minute mark, it just goes right back into only being about the vampires. Let alone the fact that it spoiled that not just 1, but 2 of the film's main characters were gonna get turned into vampires, and they're literally the only important ones that do. Sorry, Cornbread, I'm just being real. But way to take the tension out of your own climax. In reality, Sinners is a beautiful blend of a cultural timepiece and a vampire movie. So to ignore half of your film just to get people excited to see Ryan Coogler's new vampire horror movie just feels disingenuous in retrospect. But I digress. There is so goddamn much to love in this movie that the marketing being its weakest aspect is still kind of a positive. Now onto the actual movie because ooh-wee, is there a lot to touch on here. I want to first talk about the music because, in my opinion, there is no Sinners without its music. Ryan Coogler has spoken in multiple interviews about how the idea for Sinners came to him through the passing of his Uncle James. He described how in childhood he would walk down the street to his uncle's house and the two would just sit around, talk about baseball, drink bad whiskey, and listen to old blues music. Now, while they're fond memories, Coogler admitted that until his uncle passed, he always thought of blues as old man music, but described how that perspective shifted afterwards. Listening to the blues began to feel less like appeasing the older generation and more like a resurrection ritual, like he would conjure his uncle in those moments. That feeling, that connection to family and shared culture is exactly what inspired Sammie's musical talents in the film, and is what makes it feel so impactful every time he plays. He's turning Coogler's ritual into a reality. But the impact of music on the movie goes so far beyond Sammie, because Coogler, and especially composer Ludwig Göransson, knew that if music was going to drive the film, every song needed to carry weight and impact on the story, while also keeping the film from feeling like a musical. In a Variety interview, Göransson explained how he wanted to make the music feel organic and natural, just like it's a part of everyday life. And that's why songs like Travelin', Pale Pale Moon, and Last Time I Seen the Sun feel simultaneously grand while also deeply familiar, like you've somehow heard them hundreds of times before. That kind of balance is not easy to pull off, yet somehow the film does it effortlessly. And as someone who doesn't really love musicals, thank you. Now you know I can't talk about the music in Sinners without at least mentioning I Lied to You. However, before I can get to the mind-blowing scene that comes with the song, I want to explain just how important the song is for the character of Sammie. See, unlike the rest of the cast, Sammie's whole plot revolves around music, even before all the spirit summoning. He begins the movie already in love with the blues, but afraid to show it. Trapped by his family's close connection to the church. His dad thinks the blues is devil music and constantly lets Sammie know that. But the crazy thing is, Sammie isn't even a non-religious person. I mean, we see him spout a verse of the Bible from memory in the beginning of the movie, but it's the fact that he clearly values the blues over the Bible that causes tension. Sammie is talented, and he knows this, so not being allowed to express himself just eats away at him. So when the twins pick him up and he finally gets a chance to play without fear, it's his first taste of true freedom. It's a room without judgment, a room without fear of persecution, and most of all, a room that loves him for him. He doesn't have to hide anymore. He can finally be seen, loved, and appreciated by the people of this community. And that's exactly what Sammie conveys in I Lied to You. The song's lyrics are him confessing this feeling of frustration to his father, that while he tried to make Sammie a man of the church, he simply loves the blues, and nothing can change that. The line, "See, I'm full of the blues, holy water too," is him saying that he doesn't hate his father, nor does he hate the church. He's simply unwilling to accept the idea that music comes from the devil, and he's gonna continue to do what makes him happy. Now, while the song doesn't have all that many lyrics, it makes up for that in the awe-inspiring visual sequence that accompanies it. During Sammie's performance, we get payoff of the film's opening lines, how there are some people with musical abilities so strong they can communicate with spirits from the past and future. And as Sammie enters flow state, the camera starts to move throughout the juke joint, revealing spirits of traditional African and Chinese dancers, rock and roll stars. We even got people crip walking in this joint. And as the one-shot sequence continues, the music itself starts to morph and include elements of the spirits we see. We get electric guitar for the rock and rollers, hi-hats and shouts for the crip walkers, and even some gong action for the Chinese dancers. It's just so damn impressive, let alone the fact that every single one of those dancers was there on set, meaning that one person standing in the wrong spot for even a second could mess up somebody else's movements. Seriously mind-blowing to think about. On top of the musical elements, this scene perfectly represents the movie's themes about the importance and interconnectedness of culture. Sammie's ability to play this song in this moment is only possible because of hundreds of years of shared experience and culture within the Black community. Delroy Lindo's character Slim even mentions that blues is something that wasn't forced on their community, that it's something from home, and Sammie standing in that room with the spirits of the people who made that possible just hits so much harder when you think about it in that way. He's paying homage to and paving the way for the people that made American music what it is today. Now, the music and the I Lied to You sequence would be nothing without the person who put it all together, and that's Ryan Coogler. And while I could talk about how that sequence alone puts him in the GOAT conversation, I feel like there's nothing new to say about it that hasn't already been said. So instead, I want to focus in on the world he built around those flashier moments. Coogler has mentioned that one of the most important things that went into making Sinners was making the world feel real, and you can feel that desire for authenticity all throughout the movie. One of the best and most underrated scenes in the film, in my opinion, is when the shopkeeper's daughter Lisa simply walks through town to fetch her mother Grace. What would normally be a nothing scene is completely elevated by Coogler's world building and is even filmed as a one-shot for an extra layer of sauce. The camera follows Lisa as she walks through a practically constructed town filled to the brim with extras, moving cars, and props. However, the scene doesn't cut once she gets to Grace. It keeps going, and is now following Grace as she passes through town. We see a lot of the same extras, cars, and props, since it's only been a few seconds, but we also see a lot of new ones, making everything feel that much more alive. While a scene of people walking up and down the street might be a weird one to praise for some of you, it's just the fact the scene is there and was allowed time to breathe that is really praiseworthy. Most movies would have simply just had Grace in the store from the get-go, so you can skip a quote-unquote unnecessary scene like that. But Coogler wanted to make people feel like they were living in this world, not just watching the people in it. There are plenty of little moments like this throughout the film, like when Smoke goes to see his wife Annie, she has to finish up with customers in her store before they can talk. And again, Coogler shows us the whole interaction, instead of just cutting to when she's ready. Or even the scene when Slim explains his backstory, which is literally just Delroy Lindo talking for a few minutes, features this super unique audio effect where you can hear what he's talking about like it's on screen, but the visuals are left entirely to the imagination. Little scenes like these show that Coogler understands that for big flashy scenes like I Lied to You to hit, you need to first know and care about the characters in those scenes. This attention to detail is only heightened by Coogler's desire to make the movie look unique. The film itself is beautiful thanks to cinematographer Autumn Dorald Archipel, making even the smallest scenes feel grand. But that beauty is only elevated by the film's one-of-a-kind shooting format. Sinners is the first movie ever to be shot with a combination of IMAX and Panavision ultra-wide film cameras. This combination allowed Ryan Coogler to not only maximize the film's vertical aspect ratio, but also its horizontal aspect ratio, meaning they could be using as much of the screen as they want whenever they choose. And you feel that throughout the film. The ultra-wide shots of the Mississippi Delta feel vast and raw due to the massive horizontal scale of the Panavision. And when the format transitions to the full-screen IMAX, it really does feel like that world is expanding, like you're there with the characters, about to experience the film with them. The intentionality and range of Coogler's filming style is a huge part of what makes Sinners feel so different from other films, and shows that he cares just as much about making cool movies as he does making good movies. Okay, so I touched on the marketing, the music, Sammie, Ryan Coogler's direction. I guess that covers it.
Y'all clean?
Wait, what?
Y'all clean?
Oh, right! Smoke and Stack is a generational performance from Michael B. Jordan, and anyone who says he didn't deserve the Oscar is out of their minds. While I did kind of say that they shouldn't have been as much of a focus in the marketing, that was only half true. Since in a way, these characters are what makes Sinners the movie it is. While Sammie provides the film's musical elements and the main vampire conflict, the twins give us the film's emotional core. Their story about leaving to Chicago to work with the mob, but coming back to provide for their community is genuinely heartwarming, and both of their love interest subplots are fantastically executed, while also giving us a taste of the twins' different personalities. Smoke comes home to a wife who is still grieving the loss of their baby, while Stack comes back to a situationship that he was just never ready to commit to, reflecting Smoke's put-together nature and Stack's immaturity. The efforts Jordan went through behind the scenes to make identical twins feel completely distinct from one another while still feeling like family are so impressive too. He's spoken about the details that went into making the characters feel different, from their postures to the way they carry their faces, even down to wearing shoes that were too big for Smoke and shoes that were too small for Stack, representing how Smoke is slow and methodical and Stack is jittery and excitable. Jordan didn't just prepare for these characters, he became them as soon as cameras started rolling, taking his performance as twins from generally impressive to one for the history books. And then there's the deep tragedy within their characters. In the beginning of the film, they purchased the property for their juke joint from Foghorn Leghorn over here, who doesn't seem to be the nicest white man in the world, but still accepts their money and sells them the property. However, it's only revealed when Remmick's plan is already underway that the man was actually the Grand Wizard of the KKK and planned to come back to the joint and kill the twins the next morning, meaning that for the twins, there really was no surviving the night. They came home to do something good for their community, yet they were never going to be able to live in that prosperity. This poses the question, is what Remmick is doing better than what the clan would have done? Is assimilating your culture into a hive mind a better alternative than being slaughtered in the morning? Both technically do involve death, but one is a spiritual and cultural death, with your body living on, and the other takes away your body, but lets you keep your culture. There is no proper answer to the question of assimilation or death, but that minor detail adds so much weight to these characters' decisions and left me thinking for days after my first watch. And that's what really makes Sinners hit so hard. It doesn't just stay on the screen, it lingers with you, makes you really want to understand it. And that's exactly what it did to me. Now, I know it's probably a little strange for the animated white guy with a popcorn head to be this passionate about a movie that is so personal to so many people, but that honestly goes to the point I'm trying to make here. This movie is so special that it turned a kid who mostly cared about Marvel movies into someone who does deep dives into the history of blues music and its connections to the Black community. Like, I'm not a member of any of the communities that are positively represented in the film, but that doesn't mean I connected with it any less. The music, story, character work, cinematography, and direction make it so you don't need to personally see yourself in the movie for its themes to land. Instead of ostracizing others, it invites them in. I am forever grateful to this movie for changing the way I thought about film. Not just because I know words like mise en scène now, but because it led me to start this YouTube channel where I can talk about it with you guys. What a life. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, or maybe even subscribing? I'm trying to hit 500 subs by the end of May, so any support would mean the world. Thanks so much for watching, and remember to stay anti-critical.